Is Cincinnati a good place to raise your family? I moved here when I was 6 years old from Michigan and have lived here for now, 35 plus years. And I'm raising my 5 kids here. So for me, the answer is yes, but we're gonna do something a little bit different here on the channel. We're interviewing a couple of different people, both families who have moved here from another city and also families who have grown up here and decided to stay here and raise their family. It's gonna be a little bit different. It's gonna be longer form conversations, something that we don't normally do on the channel, but I'm really interested to see what you guys think about it. Be sure to like it. If you like this kind of video, leave comments below. But we wanna give you a really good feel and go in depth about Cincinnati, living here, cost of living, safety, neighborhoods, kids, activities, all the things you might wanna know and some things you didn't expect that you might get in these conversations. We're gonna get into all of that right now. All right. We are here with my good friend, Paul Poteat, former client of Team Sztanyo, part of the Sztanyo clanyo.
Yep.
Paul, thanks for having us in your home.
Welcome to Anderson.
Okay, welcome to Anderson Township. Tell us a little bit about your family and how you got to Cincinnati.
Yeah, so my wife, Samantha, and I have been married for 19 years, and we have 2 daughters. Our oldest is 16, youngest is 14. And we moved to Cincinnati from Minneapolis, Minnesota in the summer of 22, so 2.5 years ago, and have worked with a campus ministry that partners with local churches for the last 25 years. In probably 2021, it became clear that we need to be a little bit closer to my wife's parents who live in East Tennessee. My role within our ministry became a more regional role, so I was doing more traveling, and so we needed to relocate somewhere that was a little bit more centrally located in the Midwest and not on the fringes like Minneapolis.
So you had an option in choosing Cincinnati. You could have chosen different Midwestern cities, is that correct?
Yeah, and in the summer before, 2021, we basically did a tour where we went through Indy, Columbus, Cincinnati, Louisville, Lexington, to try to figure out of all of these, what makes the most sense and what would be a good place to live, and we landed on Cincinnati.
Okay, so walk me through that. What was your criteria as you were kind of scoping out those different Midwest cities? Because a lot of people watching this, they're probably doing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, probably a lot of the things that everyone wonders about. Just the school system. For us, we wanted it to be closer to an airport because just travel for me. And some of those other cities, Indy has a bigger airport, but a lot of the other ones have smaller airports. We were coming from Minneapolis and really loved the 20 years that we lived there in an urban context. And so, I mean, maybe it's just a personal thing, but the fact that Cincinnati is on a river and Minneapolis on a river, and there's a professional football team and a professional baseball team, just like there was in Minneapolis. Both teams have been mediocre, so I didn't feel like I was upgrading or downgrading necessarily.
That's a fair statement.
But
maybe more than fair for the Reds and the Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, those things factored in. We thought somewhat about like cost of living or just the feel of the city or what things there were to do. And, honestly, in that summer of 2021 when we came here, some friends of ours had spent time in Cincinnati, and, we spent an evening downtown Washington Park over the Rhine on a beautiful, summer evening. And that was something that in the other places that we went to, those same kind of settings probably exist in those other cities. Right. But we didn't find those or experience those, but we did here. Then we went down to the river and kind of walked through the park that's right there.
Yeah, Park.
Right by the stadium. And all of that was it was familiar to our time in Minneapolis, but it was also something that felt like, as friends or people come through, we could do this with them, we could host people, our kids really enjoyed it. And so kind of as it wasn't like, man, Cincinnati is the clear number one, but as we kind of weighed those different values, that kind of pushed Cincinnati over the edge.
You had that good experience here compared to the other cities. You also mentioned off camera, but you said kind of the centrality of Cincinnati. This has maybe been a little unexpected to you. You were trying to get closer to Tennessee, but talk to me about just location here.
We lived in Minneapolis for 20 years, and no one ever just passed through Minneapolis. No one was like, I'm on my way to Fargo and just need to stop by. I mean, we grew up, my wife grew up in Tennessee, I grew up in South Carolina. We spent time in ministry and went to college in the Southeast. And really when we moved to Minneapolis, we never saw those people again because no one ever came that way.
Right.
But when we moved to Cincinnati, all of a sudden we found people passing through, coming by. And so, we wanted a home where we had some space to host for things like that. And I feel like in the first year that we lived here, we probably had more people stay the night with us. Maybe, I don't want to say than all of our time in Minneapolis combined, but close to it. Like enough that it was noteworthy. And I even began to think like, oh yeah, like if you were to draw a line in the middle of the United States and you look at the eastern, side of it and you put your finger in the middle, maybe it's not on Cincinnati, but it's close enough. And we've kind of seen that, in about a 5-hour radius, you can get to, Pittsburgh, Detroit. Last summer we went to Niagara Falls and it was basically like 6 hours. Chicago.
Pick your brain on that because I'm taking my kids there in a month.
Yeah. I have some thoughts. Okay. Maybe that would be the next video.
Yeah.
But Chicago, we've gone to Chicago for like just an overnight trip twice, and caught shows and things like that. Yep. That was great. So
you keep going. Indianapolis, Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville, Atlanta, 6 hours, DC.
Totally.
So you can, in terms of that radius, it's like kind of right in the middle.
If you put your finger in Minneapolis and you drew a little radius, it's like farms,
Canada.
land, nothing, Canada, lakes. So that's been a nice surprise that different things are pretty accessible.
Well, it's cool, I think for two aspects. For you guys, it's probably because you have friends in different places of the country, so you're getting to host and do that. But if you're someone else who likes to travel and you like weekend trips, being right, that centrality is pretty cool about Cincinnati. So I'm glad you brought that up. So this video is about, is it a good place to raise a family? I'm curious, you mentioned schools, but tell me more about how your kids have enjoyed it, and do you think it's a good place to raise a family?
Yeah, so when we moved, we didn't really have any friends here. My work is remote. It's not like we moved here knowing a lot of people. And so it's been, over the course of 3 years, a process to get connected, to get somewhat planted and established in relationship dynamics. So that is just going to make moving for anyone hard, and especially for kids. And so one of our daughters probably struggled a little bit more. I mean, the age of where your kids are when you move can make it more or less challenging. And so that's going to be the same regardless if it's Cincinnati or if it's Los Angeles. That's going to be tough. But it's been nice to have more moderate weather. Our weather in Minneapolis was extreme. And the reason that's been good, even there we did stuff as a family, but here it just feels like we can go for walks. The seasonal aspect. We can go outside every month of the year with no problem. In Minneapolis, there were problems there. Again, I mentioned when we moved, like, just there's some park accessibility stuff on the river. Like, my family loves to put our bikes on the car, drive 5 minutes away, park, and there's this incredible trail that kind of the Little Miami River Trail that we can just get on and ride our bikes, and it can take you basically really close to downtown Cincinnati and all the way out to Loveland, and we've kind of biked the whole thing.
Cool.
And that gets you exercise. We pull off and stop, and we're right there by the river and kind of explore. We see people who are just rafting down the river. I want to do it. I haven't done it yet. I don't know that I'm ready to pony up and buy a raft that I put on a river that is not like an established, trail or something like that.
Yeah, maybe a little more research on that.
Yeah. But some 7-year-old boys were doing it with no problem, so I feel like I need to prove my masculinity.
You should see the Kentucky side down the Licking River and what happens there, but we'll keep going here.
Yeah. So those things have been good. I feel like, if there's sports connect people pretty easily, but I wouldn't say that either of my kids were like elite athletes. But it's been nice that I feel like in Cincinnati there are a lot of different levels of sporting teams and leagues and things like that for them to get connected to. Yep. And so they've both done that, and that's been nice. So, you know, it's taken time and intentionality, but I feel like it's felt, and part of it is, you know, in Minneapolis we lived really right in the heart of downtown in a very urban lifestyle, and here we're more suburban. Yeah. So that it's felt like we've gotten to know our neighbors, we've gotten to connect to people in the community, networking is a little bit easier. So I think those things have made it easier for our family, because so much of what it means to raise a family is to be connected to other people. Right. And I feel like our home, our neighborhood, just kind of where we are, has provided some opportunities to do that.
I love that. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up. It's a real obstacle for anyone who's uprooting your family, moving across the country or across state or whatever you're doing. And for you to kind of say like, hey, it's going to take some time. Like there's an adjustment period, but there are some elements of the city that can make it potentially easier. Like you mentioned, the weather. I find in our neighborhood it's the same thing. Like, you know, it's not Minnesota winter, so you got a little bit more seasonality there. But every year, this time of year, when spring starts happening, it's like everyone comes filtering out of their homes like ants out of a hill or something, and like you get all this neighborhood activity because people are like, "Yay, it's here!" and things start blossoming and turning green, and there's like a real buzz around that, and that's helpful for, you know, community feels. You mentioned the parks, you mentioned riding bikes. Any other activities that your family has really enjoyed or has helped you connect with community in the city?
Yeah, I mean, sort of connect to the park thing. You know, in the community that we live in, there's a pool, and I mean, as we've been a part of that, that's where everyone goes in the summertime. You know, for 2 years, Kings Island, you can buy passes there, and if you're going to go once, just get the one-time thing. But if you're going to go twice, you might as well get a pass. Oh, for sure.
It's 2 or more is the break-even point there.
Yep, and so that's theme park, water park, and our girls have liked that. That's kind of, you know, from where we live, it's a little bit north. But then if you just go west and you start getting close to, you know, Indiana, there's a ski slope there.
Yes,
perfect north, and our family has gotten passes for that the last 2 winters. And so it's just made it to where, you know, there's something that we can do when it's really cold, and we can do it together. When it's really warm, there's something we can do that anyone can do, you know. And it costs a little bit, but I feel like those places have tried to make those types of passes a little bit more affordable.
For sure, yeah.
And then
I find it very surprising that the Minnesota family found the only ski slope around here.
Yeah. Yep, and sometimes there's snow.
Yeah, that's right.
Every now and again, it's like it's like a path of snow, and then just brown and kind of dingy all around it. But I mean, this year there was a lot of snow.
We had a lot of snow this year, yeah.
So that was good. So I think those things have been what my family has enjoyed the most. Is just some of the amenities that are offered, and again, you can probably find those things in just about any city. Right. But it seems like in Cincinnati, everyone kind of knows about these particular things, and a lot of people take advantage of them. And so it's not just something that it seems like we do as a family, but as we talk to other people that we know, that's exactly what they're doing, and so we just kind of do it together.
Yeah, that's great. So as you've come to feel that out with the city and now that you've been here a few years, you've compared it to other Midwest cities. But what would you say are some of the things that you think are unique here? Or what are some things that were maybe unexpected that you weren't anticipating when you moved here?
Yeah, it's been unique to see, like even in our neighborhood, how many people grew up in Cincinnati and have either they went to college somewhere, but then their life has been a pursuit to get back to Cincinnati.
Right.
And they want, like there's a few people that we know who have done that and come back and have pursued the house they grew up in.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's kind of a local joke here. Like here it's known that when you ask somebody where they went to school, you're talking about high school. Because it's so many people grow up here, stay here, or move away and come back, like you said. And for people who aren't from here, that can be a pretty big turnoff. I think they can be like, what is the deal? Like it's too close knit, maybe too. They don't feel like they can pierce that potentially. But for here locally, you're like, no, there's roots, there's traditions, there's like, there's part of that.
Yeah,
But yeah, what else?
And I haven't felt the like difficult to break in, but it's clear like you just need to understand a lot of people know each other and are connected, and there's a fondness. And I mean, that says something about the nature of the city, you know, like I lived in Minneapolis for 20 years and, you know, that was not it wasn't the same feel in that respect. So that was kind of surprising. You know, we're on the east side of Cincinnati, and you know, there's the Ohio River that's kind of on the border between Ohio and Kentucky, but then the Little Miami kind of cuts through Cincinnati. And for us, that river has made it. There's only a couple of ways to get from where we live to downtown, and they're either trafficky, kind of directly across the river, or you have to go these big loops. So, you know, when we lived in Minneapolis, probably 10 minutes and we were just about anywhere. But here, it's more like 15, 20. So that's...
I hope the person watching from LA is laughing right now, by the way. Ooh, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Up from 10.
Yeah. So, but you know,
Midwestern problems, you know.
Yeah. Relatively speaking, though, for us, it was like, oh, we're driving more and traveling more, and it takes time.
Well, I do think one thing alongside I want to speak to that is I think a lot of people when they get here are surprised by the topography of Cincinnati, because not only do you have the rivers like you're talking about, but you have more hills than people are expecting. So the city's not really laid out like a grid. You know, it's like it can be challenging to figure out east to west, especially when you're on different elevations and the roads are a little bit, you know, not straight. So that is one thing that people need to kind of figure out here.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned just the centrality of Cincinnati, and that's been a great thing. And then some of the different opportunities that we have. You know, when we first came through and we're looking, I think I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier, but we went to Washington Park and there was the fountain, and it's right by over the Rhine, and there's all these different restaurants. And so there are places you can go where there's just a lot of people and things to do, and our kids really enjoyed that, and in ways that was a little bit of a surprise for us in a pleasant way.
So what would you say are the biggest cons or like negatives of the city that maybe you weren't anticipating, or maybe you were, maybe you'd already done the research? Like, what are your least favorite things about Cincinnati?
You know, I think where we lived in Minneapolis, just the diversity around us was richer. And it seems like that is probably very true for, I mean, this probably isn't a knock on Cincinnati. It's more of the reality that in Minneapolis we lived very close to the urban center, and here we live out in a township. And I feel like you've got clearly downtown Cincinnati and everything that's happening around that, but then you've got these clear pockets or communities that seem to be fairly distinct, and within each of those, everyone is kind of familiar within each of those. So when you move to Cincinnati and you don't know about that, or don't know like, oh, Mason and Madeira and Westchester and, you know, Batavia, and then it's right there by northern Kentucky, and so there's a lot of people that work and do a lot of life in Cincinnati, but they actually live in northern Kentucky. Those were just things that it took time to get used to, and to experience. You know, there is an attractive element to the fact that everyone, or that a number of people move and then come back and have lived in Cincinnati for a long time, and that brings about a very beautiful tradition and heritage. But sometimes that seems like, from someone who's not from Cincinnati coming in, that there's certain traditions or things that maybe are valued a little bit too much, and it's like, you know, you can just chill out a little bit, because again, where we lived in Minneapolis was a very transient place, but where we've moved to in Cincinnati, there is more holdover, and so that was just a surprise. But again, probably not necessarily true to Cincinnati. It's maybe just true to where you live, because we were moving again because people are going to watch this video, and some are going to be moving from a more rural context, and so Cincinnati is going to feel like, man, we're going to the city,
right.
And that's going to raise certain questions. But then, you know, in my case, we were going from Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is all kind of, you know, conjoined together, and so Cincinnati felt like a step down in terms of population density and, all those kinds of things. And so that's had ramifications, because some people who maybe are moving and looking to move to the city for the first time, it's going to be more expensive. But if you lived in a bigger city, Cincinnati is going to feel more affordable.
Well, it's a great observation about the transient nature versus, the traditions here. And because you do feel that, you even feel that in the architecture. Like when you went down to Washington Park and you saw Music Hall, it's like, there's a different kind of vibe here that is older, but it's not like East Coast old. It's, it's its own thing here. But that is one way I often try to describe Cincinnati is like this, if you're looking for a place to put down roots and like, which this is my story, like I want to be around my kids, I want to be around my grandkids. This is a great city for that. Because it's not as like, you're here for a little bit, then you're gone, or you're going just for the career, uptick or anything like that. It's a great place for families. So some of the big ones, just maybe we can hit briefly, but that a lot of people are looking for, maybe cost of living, schools, safe neighborhoods. What would you say? How would you speak to these things here?
Yeah, again, like with the cost of living for us, it's felt a little bit cheaper than it was in Minneapolis. And so, when I first signed up for my car insurance, it was like, what am I going to do with all this extra money? Like, that was a great thing. So, there's some give and take there. So we haven't felt a pinch on that. We felt a little bit more freedom. Yeah. But again, that's relative to where we're moving from, and so I think that kind of depends.
Sure.
But it hasn't felt like this exorbitant thing. I mean, there are some times where it seems like just about every year, at least the school district that we're in, there's a new levy that is on the ballot to help fund the schools, which that affects the property taxes and things like that. And I don't know how much that's like specific kind of to where you live or around the city, but that hasn't felt difficult. With the schools, in Minneapolis, our kids went to a Mandarin immersion school. And so we were really looking for that in part of our move, and found that in this particular school district, they offer a really good Mandarin program alongside of like their Spanish and French and German and all of that has an AP, what would it be, an AP lane, AP trajectory. And so that really affected us wanting to live here because we want our girls to experience that, and that's been a good thing to continue from their language learning, that they experienced. And as our girls have been involved in school sports and we've traveled around, it seemed like the schools, I've enjoyed the different tournaments and things that we've been to, and just my experience of other schools has not been one of negativity, like, oh, I don't want to go around that school. It's been, kind of even average across the board. Like, these seem like good places, and our school's been great. The high school is actually just right over the woods right here beside our house. Right. So we get to hear them every Friday night, all the loudspeakers. But that's been good. And what we've learned as we moved is there are also a lot of private Catholic schools. Yeah. In our neighborhood, it's at least 50-50 for public school and private Catholic. It might even lean a little bit towards the private Catholic school. Yeah. And so just learning.
We're out in, Anderson Township, and that's kind of how Anderson was formed, was a lot of the Catholics moved east from the city. So there's maybe a little bit of a higher population of Catholic on this east part of town.
Yep. And so even, there are kids who are in the public school system, but then as they're about to take the step into high school, they kind of make the switch and go to a private Catholic high school. And so, you walk around the neighborhoods and you see little signs in there of their kids are going to go to this private Catholic high school. And again, where I grew up in South Carolina, there wasn't really any of that. I think there was maybe one that I knew of, one private school in the whole city. And then in Minneapolis, there were some private schools, but there were one or two private Catholic schools, but it seems like here in Cincinnati, there are a lot of those. Yeah. And that probably has gotten more of a draw because, with COVID, a lot of people had problems with the public school systems, and so that opened the door to private schools. And so I think a lot of families in Cincinnati would thrive a little bit more because there's so many that are offered. So
there's private schools, and there's also been a fairly strong rise of different homeschools and homeschool co-ops around Cincinnati as well. So there's quite a mix in terms of what you want to do for your school options.
You mentioned safety, and again, for us coming from where we lived in Minneapolis to here, it has felt, There are a number of times where I come home, our daughter takes the bus to school in the mornings, and I come home and the front door is unlocked. And in Minneapolis, I would start looking around the house to see like what is probably gone. But here, that hasn't been an issue. You know, like within the first month, one of the first things one of our daughters said was, I just feel a lot safer here.
Wow.
So again, part of that is from where we live to where we do live now. But I think as you get into some of these townships outside of the city, I think there's probably a greater sense of safety. I mean, there has been some, you know, small theft and break-ins, you know, in our neighborhood in the 3 years that we've lived here, but it's always been, you know, because people left a garage door open and someone was like driving around, and I just think that's gonna happen anywhere. Mm-hmm. But just in general, you know, in the years that we lived in Minneapolis, there were certain things that you worried about in terms of car break-in or car theft or different things like that here I just don't even think about anymore. Yeah. So, you know, for some people who maybe have lived out in the country where you never lock your doors, you're not gonna think about, or moving to a city is gonna feel like less safe. But in terms of the 2 urban centers that I've lived around, Cincinnati has felt, you know, much more family-friendly, safer than what I experienced before.
Awesome. Any other final thoughts you have that you wanna share to the good people out there in the Sztanyo, Sztanyo?
Yeah, I think that Cincinnati has been a great place for us moving in. But I think that we've learned as a family, anywhere you move, the first year is going to be challenging because there's a lot of loss associated with change. The second year gets a little bit better. And if we had had this conversation in the first year, it would have probably leaned a little bit more negative. The second year, it probably would have been a little bit more neutral. The third year, a little more positive, because I just think it takes time to get settled, to meet your neighbors, to feel like that Cincinnati feels like our home base now, whereas it probably didn't last year, and it definitely didn't our first year. And so you've got to give it time. So even if you move in, if you come to Cincinnati and that first experience is not what this video has billed it to be, or what your expectation was,
then blame Paul.
blame me. But I think it's easy to overestimate what year 1 will be like and to underestimate what year 3 will be like. So be patient.
That's great advice. Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time today, and I'm really glad your family's in the city.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that you helped us find a good place to live. So thanks.
All right, thanks. Sztanyo, Sztanyo, we hope you enjoyed that interview. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've got part 2 of this series coming next, so stay tuned for that. And if you do have real estate needs in the Greater Cincinnati area, whether you're looking to buy or sell, give my team a call, 513-813-6293. We would love to be your real estate team of choice. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.